Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next The Dragon Prince video. This will wrap up my kind of like day one coverage of The Dragon Prince Book 4 Earth, and I'm going to be reviewing episode 8 and 9, so Rex, Igneous and Escape from Umber Tor. So these are the last two episodes of Book 4. Overall, they were good, but like I was saying in the last review, Book 4 very much ends up feeling like, yeah, this is a part one. This is a part one of a second phase of the story. It really has relatively no like resolution to like a lot of what it's building up. Now, we didn't expect that with a lot of the Aravos plot stuff. I suppose we did get some with like some of the side plot stuff, like mainly the Amaya and Janai plot. I feel like is like there's still a little bit to, I suppose, go into, but for the most part it felt like that could have turned into like a really big thing, and it ended up being like, I suppose, a little smaller than we maybe expected it to be. But in terms of the main plot, of course, we get the map that Rex Igneous has. Well, Claudia ends up getting away with it, so they're on the right path. But the other characters, you know, they basically get out alive is, I suppose, the main thing. But a big thing, I suppose, is that Rayla, one, finally finds out for sure Viren is alive, and ends up getting the coins back with her parents and Runan. So that was actually quite notable. And we'll get into this, of course, as we discuss it, of course. So I'll start off with the Janai plot with her brother. The brother, I think, is absolutely going to come out of this season as just this absolutely like very hateable character, because it just felt like he's just going on and on about like the tradition and stuff like that, and it's very much this approach that is like absolutely completely unaware of any progress being made. That, you know, we could, you know, like kind of Janai says at the end, like we can kind of make history ourselves in a way. Like, I make history, it's not like done to me in a way. And he was just completely unable to kind of realize that. And so him challenging her to like a blood duel for leadership of the Sunfire Elves was like, okay, we'll see what they do. They did some decent, I think, characterization with addressing like you have to turn this into an arc. Does she want to be queen? It's been sort of forced upon her because I suppose she's next in line, but does she want to? And so the scene with Amaya, I thought, was actually like pretty well done. That yes, we know she wants to be with Amaya, but the honesty of just like, do you know what? I don't think I ever felt like I wanted it before, which is why the brother feels that way, thinks he knows her. But actually, she does want to lead her people going forward. And in a way, it's because she realizes that going into this kind of new era, it probably needs someone like her who can see how things are changing and how things are going to go. So we get to the fight, and it actually does turn into a fight. She actually does take part in the fight. And I like that it wasn't that like there was too much to it. It wasn't this giant action set piece. He's a mage, he fires some blasts at her, she overpowers him, cuts his staff, and he's trying to be like, as part of tradition, you have to finish me off. And she's just like, no. Like she did when she gave the judgment for the punishment for the character from a few episodes ago. She just, you know, made the decision, but not in line with tradition. And most people were happy with it, because in a way you can sort of see this like darker, like Janai more or less kind of refers to it as like, you know, a deity in the past referred to this as basically kind of like a stupid tradition that all it would ever do is just prompt random people to challenge the king and queen, and it just created distractions from being able to actually do anything. So like it's one thing to always have like the position of leader able to be kind of changed, but you also need some stability to actually allow stuff to happen. So that was quite interesting. Interestingly, they didn't at all this book go into anything about Aditi apart from the episode 4 flashback about she disappeared and Aravos is suspected of being the one to take her out. They didn't explore that exactly yet, because obviously Aravos whispered in the previous queen's ear right before he killed her something incredibly shocking that she couldn't fight back. So I'm guessing it probably is something about what happened to Aditi. So that's quite interesting. Similarly, I suppose in relation to that flashback as well, I forgot to mention, we got the sort of like orphan queen thing that they were setting up that might be a side story they tell at some point. She was important in terms of outing Aravos as the one behind a lot of what was happening in the past. And Rex Igneous notes that actually Ezran kind of looks like her. So that's a kind of interesting comparison. But the net result on that Amaya side of the plot is that Janai is fully in charge. What looked like there was maybe going to be a big uprising, a coup or something like that, isn't going to happen. So that's good. And they managed to, I think, resolve all that stuff quite nicely, having a decent amount of nuance in the writing, that we will go forward with kind of hope, idealism, and we won't be getting into too many like civil wars, families being torn apart just yet. So that stuff is all fine. We didn't get the wedding, but I don't think we maybe expected it just because of the amount of time that was actually kind of passing here. Interestingly, they made the decision to not have really scenes involving Soren and Viren. They just kind of turn up kind of almost randomly in the episode, and it's implied that maybe conversations have taken place like off screen more or less. And this is where you could maybe tell like that in terms of the writing, like it almost felt like they were oddly like running out of time, even though they've planned this out really nicely. In that, like, obviously Claudia coming in at the end of episode 8 and immediately putting like everyone, including Rex Igneous, to sleep, made for a pretty eventful kind of second episode as they find the map on the tooth and they go to leave. But it is relatively like basic and simple, like the actual details of what ends up happening. You know, everyone's put to sleep, some people wake up, we gradually get the whole cast woken up. Rex Igneous goes on a bit of a rampage and causes just like chaos around the kind of battlefield, and it's all about kind of everyone escaping. It obviously leads up to Rayla sees Viren, which is notable. Something that she wasn't able to accomplish in 2 years, she finally spots right now and heads out to pursue. They do have a scene with Callum where he's kind of like, go, you know, like, you need to do this, go. So I guess that was meant to be more or less the resolution to this ultimately, because things looked a bit nicer, I suppose, at the end. I still would say I wasn't particularly happy with the way that whole plot was done throughout this book. It wasn't terrible or anything like that, but I just felt like it could have been so much better done than just having like 20 scenes where the characters like begin to talk normally and then literally just look away from each other because they just won't have a full-on proper conversation about this, and then we'll kind of resolve it with this kind of like, oh yeah, go after Viren, of course. I thought the better way to do it probably would have been like, you know, look, let me go with you and just trust Soren to be the crown guard and protect Ezran, rather than, you know, Callum, who... This is probably the thing with this, is that Callum is basically like the main character, but it didn't feel that way in this book, like, at all. It feels like he feels a bit directionless because the Aravos kind of possession plot didn't feel strong enough to justify like him asking someone to kill him. And then they didn't really do much with regards to, like, say, progressing him as a mage necessarily. So that's probably the main thing coming out of this book, that I feel like they need to do some stuff with Callum to really, I think, build him up a little bit more. I was a bit disappointed that we didn't get pretty much anything on like arcanums and like potentially Callum learning other arcanums. I get it, like, it's still just part 1. There's opportunity to do this in like book 5, book 6, book 7 if they really want to. But I think there was an opportunity here to potentially do something like where have him learn the Moon Arcanum and do the Moon spell or something like that. But maybe they're saving that up to be something more significant down the road. So it all builds up to this confrontation where like Vera and Claudia and Terry are escaping with the map, and Rayla catches up to them right as basically like Terry is the one sort of like left behind. So it's a big standoff of basically like, I'll kill Terry unless you hand the map over. Claudia immediately changes the situation by revealing that, oh yeah, I have my my dad's coin bag basically. And what do you know? These three people look like they're important to you. So how about we do an exchange? These 3 coins for Terry. And she ends up tricking Rayla, giving her rocks in a bag instead of that. But coming out of it, there's a very interesting scene where for the first time in like the entire thing, Terry kind of calls Claudia out for, I've been okay with dark magic stuff, but what you did in how like you handle yourself in that kind of exchange with Rayla, Moonshadow Elf, was so like over the line. Like it was cruel. Like he that's I think what really hits her hard more than like, it was a tough situation. Him calling her cruel for doing that and tricking her like that it really hits her. And I think that's why, like, really unexpectedly, I didn't expect the show to do this. Claudia just goes straight back and gives the coins. And this is very interesting because I think a lot of people were feeling that with Claudia, they're going to go down the path of like, are they going to make the decision and commit to, she is now effectively the villain of the series and she'll do something that makes her irredeemable. They're not committing to doing that just yet. She still is very much on the, I'm following Aravos because she has reasoning, because like she also, like, her interpretation of history is that Aravos helped humans and she believes that dark magic thing. And in helping Aravos, she'll allow her father to be back to life permanently. So, you understand why she is fully committed on this side and why right now there's no reason really being had here. A lot's gonna, I suppose, probably change when Aravos actually like properly enters the story. And if he does reveal that he has just sort of used her, that might be a turning point for her. It made the very like end scene feel a little bit like weird in terms of like, okay, I guess Viren has used dark magic for the first time in this book, and okay, his face is all dark magic-y. They're almost implying like, are things going back to the way they were in book 3 or not? And is he more back to becoming the villain, and he really wants to, make himself fully alive again? And Claudia is actually the one who still has hope. You still have hope for in terms of like being able to turn things around a little bit. But at the same time, there are moments like when Claudia mentions sort of like Callum, and she's asked like, oh, a friend of yours? And she says not anymore. So she is full on committed to the idea of like, she is on a different side than a lot of the people she used to be close with. So she's committing to this whole thing, but you still see the potential for kind of good in her. It's obviously a quite complicated situation, but like I thought they right at the end delivered some depth out of this, with her kind of realizing that like, because you do have the thing, she's doing these acts where she basically is the full-on villain. But then they go back to having her and her just like odd personality and the funny moments when not a lot is going on. So it's a real kind of contrast of like, you want more from this character, but you are aware, sort of like Viren, the lengths that these characters are willing to go through are quite intense. That probably leads to Rex Igneous himself. Interesting characterization as more of like the hoarding kind of like typical dragon, You have to bring a gift to him, and they all bring like what stuff that they feel is valuable to themselves, but he doesn't care because that value doesn't mean anything to him. And so this is, of course, where I actually predicted this before Ezran actually did it, that they'd bring out the special, but I think it's meant to be chocolate tart thing, because I think one of the images from the end of the episodes shows a tart next to like a chocolate bar. So I think the thing is it's meant to be some sort of a chocolate kind of tart thing. He gives that to Rex Igneous, and he actually really likes this and is open to answering the question at last. They ask, where is the prison? Now, this is a weird one because, like, if it was just knowledge that he had, it's kind of in a way like pointless for them to learn it, because then all of a sudden multiple people have the information, and so there's more of an option for the enemies to actually get a hold of it. That was obviously the weird thing in all of this, and hence why like Rex Igneous is sort of like correct in saying like, okay, yes, I theoretically have this knowledge, but why would I give it to you when like he's the most dangerous person in the world? Like, okay, you're telling me that you don't want to free him, but still, why would I tell you? Just me having it is keeping it a secret. So, obviously it changed when it turned into just being like a physical thing. Now, admittedly, like it being something they couldn't necessarily exactly take from the dragon because it was just straight up his tooth, and they weren't exactly pulling out a dragon's tooth, made it like a bit of a weird situation in terms of like where we go next. It feels like it's set up for book 5 to be the water book or ocean. I forget the exact wording of what they call the water magic. Is it just water, or is it like sea or ocean? But I think that's where we're heading, because if you look at the map on the tooth and compare it to the actual map of Zadia, what seems to be highlighted is that it shows basically the bodies of water of Zadia specifically. So I have this up here, I'm just looking at it here, and it seems to match pretty exactly. It just shows every single body of water, like river, in Zadia. And the little kind of thing that's pointing out, I suppose X marks the spot, seems to be in the middle of the Sea of the Cast Out. So I'm guessing that's where next book is going. Because the other thing I kind of forgot about in the middle of all of this, or if it felt like the writing almost forgot about, is they said that all of the archdragons got a piece of the puzzle. So it feels a bit like much in a way that, like, wait, so there's a looking glass and then just a map. Anything else? Like I assume there's other things, like a key to get in, something like that, a thing you need to even like get there under the water or something like that. So because they have to, I suppose, have a reason to meet more of the other dragons. So I'm guessing like the order they're doing it in, does it matter? I'm not sure, because this is probably a situation where like they'll get there and realize like, oh, we actually can't get in here without other things being important. I don't know. There might be some sort of a thing where like, okay, the prison is here, but we literally can't get in. We need the moon dragon to like use moon powers to like affect the water levels, or who knows like what they'll end up doing. But that seems to be the setup, because we have to still have a book that is like water. We have to have a book that is star, I guess. And then that leaves like dark, or just a random name for like the final season. Plus there's still the potential for like, well, we still have to deal with like Sol Regum is still the archdragon for Sun, right? So I guess they have to go to him to get one piece of the puzzle, I think. The moon archdragon, like apart from the flashback, hasn't really been brought up, and like what's going on there. And with the fact that Rayla now has those coins, I guess there's now going to be a bit of a plot point to freeing them. And once she has like all of her parental figures back, I suppose that properly opens the door to doing more development on their relationship, and that should mean that like, okay, her pursuit of Viren is not out of like the same level of like vengeance as it was before. It's just to stop him because he's on the opposing side. Whereas before there was a sense of like he's clearly done something to her parents, and all this other stuff. So that probably would change things. The question is obviously like, how do you reverse that? Do you have to do a dark magic spell to reverse it? Can you just like destroy the coins and that's what fixes them? But they don't really know. They feel like that's too risky. That's going to be a very interesting one to see if they can resolve that. Because it feels like now that Rayla has those coins, there's no way those characters don't come back. So that's going to be kind of important. And once Renan is back, I think that probably opens up, like, you can bring the Silver Grove, home of the Moonshadow Elves, like, more into that sort of, like, peace between both sides situation. That shouldn't really be a problem. And then you kind of are, at that point, just, I suppose, mainly dealing with, I guess, like, Star and, like, Ocean, like, Tide Elves, or whatever they're called, as being the ones that you have left. Yes, you in this book didn't really end up dealing with too many like Earth Elves overall. Like I said, that point in the middle I thought was relatively disappointing, where we just met like 3 riders or something like that, and then Nathan really. Otherwise, like, Terry's the main Earth Elf that we know. So there's a lot of that stuff that I think is somewhat interesting to see what they do with it. They did, interestingly, have a meeting at the end between Zubeia and Rex Igneous when Rex Igneous comes out. That was interesting in that, like, again, no dialogue really. She just sort of like scares him off, and gets to be the protective mother to Zim once again. The big part of the Rex Igneous meeting, though, I thought was interesting, was that the whole time, like, when he was talking about Avazandum and stuff like that, I'm like, he's referring to Avazandum as if Avazandum is still alive. When is someone going to point this out? And finally they do. And that's actually the thing that sort of, in a way, snaps him out of it. Of, like, that's when he reveals that, oh yeah, I used to be friends with Avazandum. Whereas before, I guess because he felt his rival was still alive, he was being very mean and aggressive about it. But once he realized Avazandum was dead, he became a little bit more kind of normal kind of about things. Now, the question obviously is going to be like, can they get the map? How will they follow, where they're going? That's going to be a bit of an interesting one. He walked off like he wasn't going to be immediately contactable, but the main door is open, so they should have a bit easier access to him, rather than needing to go all the way around the secret entrance and stuff like that. Anything else, I suppose, to talk about? Again, this is just my first watch through. There's obviously going to be little bits and pieces that I kind of completely like miss or skip over or anything like that. I did think over the course of the season it was interesting. They didn't mention any of the other human kingdoms, like, at all. Like, we didn't refer to any of them, even dealing with the whole idea of, like, say, like, Durin and, like, Anya, Neolandia, and the whole situation of, like, their king is apparently still in a coma. Is that still the case or not? Because obviously they lost the prince in the battle from the end of book 3. What's going on there? There's just that sort of sense of, like, the Dragon Prince always seems to have, of just, like, keeping the scope of things actually a little bit smaller than you think is actually the case. And like, again, it's the whole idea of, like, peace between both sides. But like I said before, it's very much Catullus and, like, Lux Aurea, not really all of Zadia. Just because it's, even though I guess we've actually been to quite a bit of Zadia, the fact that we've never met, like, the leaders of a lot of the different kind of groups of elves, it creates a bit of a kind of, like, issue in that way. So, there's stuff like that. But I still would say, after 3 years, it was great to have this show back. But I do think, I hope they say something about season 5, sooner rather than later, because I definitely end this book 4, just feeling like I want some quicker follow up to this. I want to get into a little bit more of a flow. So, if it's at all possible, I like there to be minimal break between 4 and 5, and if you have to take a longer break, have it be at like the halfway point of Mystery of Arvos. Which again, speaking of Arvos, I find it very interesting that the creature, the moth butterfly creature thing, basically like amounted to like nothing. Like there was a little bit of like, oh, he's roughly directing us in the right way, but it doesn't speak or communicate that well. Like, what is it? Like, there's a few like weird, unexplained things like that, and then, like I said, like the threat of like, I suppose, Arvos being like active in the story after the 4th episode and the possession scene was a bit odd to me, an odd decision, and that's what very much highlights that. Oh yeah, there are like 4 stages of things that we need to do before we actually like get and free Arvos. This was just one of those things. No, just 9 episodes. Having done the rewatch of the first 3 seasons in the build up to this very much feels kind of similar in a way to book 1, where you reflect back on it and like, oh yeah, like there's all this stuff that actually only happens in book 2 and 3. There's book 1 and 2 especially are very just focused on 1 or 2 things. Book 3 is a little bit more kind of broad as the sort of finale to the first stage of the story, and this went back to being more of a part 1. And that's fine. I want the follow-up a little quicker this time, so hopefully they say something soon. But yeah, they're my initial impressions of the Dragon Prince season 4. I'll probably have another video that I'll put out in maybe like a day or 2 or something like that, where I'll talk more about like more specific thoughts, like compiling everything together. What were the kind of overall standout moments from this season after like a rewatch, basically. But yeah, they're my thoughts and after just finishing watching the last 2 episodes, finishing my initial watch through of book 4 Earth. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were, but that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.